Welcome, everyone. Ready for a deep dive into Rocket Lab? They're not just shooting for the stars, they're trying to build a whole space highway. We've got reports, articles, even some of your notes, all about Rocket Lab, and we're going to break it down. We'll extract those nuggets of knowledge that make you go, whoa, I never knew that.
What's really interesting is how ambitious they are. It goes way beyond just rockets. They want to be the go-to for small satellites, the whole shebang. Design, launch, the whole 9 yards.
So like a one-stop shop for all your tiny satellite needs? I like it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so let's start with their vision. What are they actually trying to achieve?
So imagine launching a satellite is like as easy as ordering an Uber.
Okay, I can get behind that.
That's kind of the world Rocket Lab is aiming for, making space accessible to everyone, especially for all those small satellites popping up everywhere.
Democratizing space. Love that. Sounds like they're breaking down those barriers so it's not just governments and huge companies calling the shots anymore.
Exactly. And they're doing it through innovative tech and a relentless focus on cutting costs. Take their Electron rocket, for example. It's designed specifically for these smaller payloads, and it boasts a remarkable success rate, crucial for building trust and getting those customers.
Yeah, reliability and efficiency. Gotta have those. But sounds like they're not stopping there. There's the Neutron rocket in the works, right? What's the deal with that one?
Neutron is a real game changer, no doubt. It's designed for heftier payloads, opening up a whole new world of possibilities for missions that need a little extra oomph. But the real magic trick, reusability. They're aiming to recover and reuse the first stage, which could slash launch costs dramatically.
Reusability, the holy grail of space travel. If they crack that, it could turn the whole industry on its head.
Totally agree.
But it's not just about rockets themselves, is it? You mentioned their space systems division. How does that fit into their grand plan?
Space systems is where they're really setting themselves apart. It's a full-service deal, offering everything from design to mission management. You name it, they got it. They even produce key satellite parts themselves, like solar cells and attitude control systems. And these components are the real deal, used in over 1,500 missions.
1,500? That's crazy. So they're building a whole ecosystem around small satellites, providing everything you need to get your space baby up there and running.
Yep, pretty much. A bold vision, no question. But can they actually pull it off? I mean, the space game is getting pretty crowded these days.
True. You've got big names like SpaceX. How does Rocket Lab even compete with those giants?
Well, they're not really going head-to-head with SpaceX, who are more focused on those massive payloads, right? Rocket Lab's carved out their own lane, specializing in small satellite launches. And they're lightning fast, too.
Yeah.
Aiming to get wait times down to just 6 months between launches.
6 months. That's unheard of. The old way was measured in years, not months. Got to be a huge advantage for their clients.
Oh, absolutely. It means companies, organizations, they can get their satellites up there in a flash. In this fast-paced world of space tech, that kind of speed is priceless.
So speed's a big plus. But how about the cost? Can they keep up on that front?
Definitely working on it. They've got those 3D printed Rutherford engines on the Electron rocket, which is a massive innovation. 3D printing means quicker production, lower costs, which keeps those launch prices nice and competitive. And of course, reusability with the Neutron is a game changer in the long run.
Okay, speed, cost, and focusing on a market that's just exploding. Seems like a solid recipe. But let's get down to brass tacks. Are they actually profitable?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? Not yet. But they've got a massive backlog of orders, a sure sign that demand is there. Most analysts are feeling pretty optimistic, predicting they'll hit profitability pretty soon.
Sounds promising. But like any industry, especially one as unpredictable as space, there are always bumps in the road. What are some potential challenges they could face?
Launch failures are a big one. Always a risk. Costly, damaging to their reputation, a real setback. And developing the Neutron rocket, that's a huge endeavor. There's always a chance for delays or those pesky technical hiccups. Oh, and of course, the competition in the small satellite launch market is heating up. New players are emerging all the time.
Sounds like a constant juggling act.
Yeah.
They got to stay agile and keep innovating to navigate all that.
Absolutely, and they are. One example, they've been expanding their space systems division, offering those comprehensive solutions, diversifying their portfolio. That helps with risk management and strengthens their position in the market.
Smart move. So let's zoom in on that space systems division for a minute. What are they doing there that's particularly noteworthy?
They've developed this awesome satellite platform. It's called Photon. Flexible, customizable, you can tailor it to all sorts of missions, like a Swiss Army knife of spacecraft.
Oh, I like that. So they're not just launching other people's stuff, they're building their own satellites too.
Exactly. And not only building, but also operating them, mission management, the whole deal. Launch logistics, post-launch operations, they handle it all, trying to make space accessible for everyone, from small startups to big agencies.
A one-stop shop for all your space needs. Ambitious, to say the least. But how does this all tie into the bigger picture, especially with all the talk about the US and China racing for space dominance? Does Rocket Lab play a role in that?
That's a great point. They absolutely do. Rocket Lab's success actually has strategic significance for the U.S. in this whole space race scenario.
Wait, really? How so?
By providing more launch options for the U.S., Rocket Lab helps bolster national security and resilience in space.
So it's about not putting all our eggs in one basket, especially with China's space program growing at such a rapid pace. Makes sense.
Precisely. It's a direct response to China's increasing presence and ambition in space. And it's not just symbolic. They're actively working with agencies like the Space Development Agency, contributing to national security objectives.
So they're right there on the front lines of this technological and geopolitical showdown.
Yeah.
Pretty intense. But you mentioned earlier that they're building their own satellites. What are those satellites actually used for? And is there any connection to the crypto world, which seems to be getting its tentacles into everything these days?
Interesting question. While Rocket Lab hasn't openly connected themselves with cryptocurrency or blockchain like some other space companies,
Like who?
SpaceChain, for example, they've actually launched blockchain tech into space. But if we look at the big picture, the possibilities for blockchain in space are immense.
Okay, color me intrigued. Tell me more.
Think about it. Blockchain is all about secure and transparent transactions, right? Perfect for the complexities of space.
Yeah, I see where you're going with this. But are we talking theoretical or is this actually happening?
Already happening. Companies like Blockstream are using satellites to distribute Bitcoin.
So it's not just a sci-fi fantasy, it's real.
Exactly. And while Rocket Lab hasn't publicly announced anything specific to blockchain, their launch services could easily be used by crypto companies for future space projects.
So there's this potential synergy just waiting to be tapped into. That's exciting.
It is. It'll be fascinating to see where it all leads.
This deep dive has been incredible already. We've covered so much, from their vision of opening up space for everyone, to their groundbreaking technology, their strategic role in the global space race, and now even this potential link to blockchain. It's clear Rocket Lab is a company to watch closely.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Rocket Lab, where the sky's not the limit, it's just the starting point.
I'm still reeling from all that information. It's amazing how much they've got going on. Before the break, you mentioned keeping an eye on their finances and the success of the Neutron rocket. Where do we even begin with all that?
Let's tackle the big one first, profitability. Rocket Lab is aiming for some pretty ambitious revenue targets, something like $125 to $135 million just for the fourth quarter of 2024.
Whoa, that's a big number. But can they actually hit that? Especially since they're not in the black yet.
It's a steep climb, no doubt. But remember that huge backlog of orders, that's a pipeline of launches just waiting to happen, which means a potential influx of revenue.
So the demand's there, but they got to actually launch those rockets. What could throw a wrench in their plans?
Good question. One risk is their reliance on the Electron for revenue. If one of those launches goes south, it could really hurt their bottom line, not to mention their reputation.
It's like betting the farm on one horse.
Yeah, kind of. But they know this, and they're working on diversifying their income streams. The Neutron rocket is a big part of that strategy. It'll open them up to a whole new range of clients and missions, especially those needing to haul heavier stuff.
So it's not just about bigger rockets, it's about spreading the risk, tapping into new markets.
Exactly. But even with a diverse portfolio, you can't predict everything in space. It's a risky business.
For sure, launching rockets is no walk in the park. Things can go wrong, and when they do, it's usually pretty spectacular.
You said it. We've seen those rocket explosions during tests and even launches, a stark reminder of how challenging this industry can be. And then there's the competition. We talked about SpaceX, but are there other players Rocket Lab should be watching?
Yeah. Who else is crowding the space highway these days?
The small satellite launch market is getting more competitive all the time. New companies are popping up left through right, each with their own tech and strategies. Rocket Lab can't just sit back and relax.
They got to stay ahead of the curve, keep pushing those boundaries. But what about things they can't control, like regulations and government funding? Space programs can be at the mercy of politicians, right?
Definitely. The space industry is heavily regulated, and those regulations can change on a dime. And as we've seen before, government funding for space programs can be a bit of a roller coaster ride depending on who's in charge and what their priorities are.
Sounds like they're navigating a minefield. But let's shift gears back to their space systems division for a bit. We touched on the Photon platform earlier, but what other cool stuff are they doing over there?
Well, one of their big achievements is that they make a lot of key satellite components in-house. Solar cells, attitude control systems, separation devices, the works. And these components are the real deal, tried and tested. We're talking over 1,500 space missions under their belt.
1,500.
Yeah.
That's a serious track record.
Yeah.
They're building a reputation for being the reliable ones, the ones you can count on.
Absolutely. And to boost their game even further, they went and acquired a company called Advanced Solutions, Inc. They specialize in software for, all those complex control systems for flight and ground operations.
Smart move. Software is the brain of the operation these days, especially with satellites getting more and more sophisticated.
Couldn't agree more. And remember, it's not just about the parts and platforms. They're also offering mission management services, the whole package. Launch logistics, keeping the satellite running after it's up there. They handle it all. It's all about making space accessible, whether you're a small startup or a big government agency.
A true space ecosystem. But how does this all connect back to the big picture? The U.S.-China space race. We talked about it earlier, but I'd love to hear more about how Rocket Lab fits into that dynamic.
Right. Well, their success is actually a big deal for the U.S. when it comes to competing with China in space.
We talked about diversifying launch options, but how else do they contribute?
It's all about national security and resilience in space. Rocket Lab helps reduce America's dependence on other launch providers, especially with China's space program getting bigger and bolder.
So it's about not putting all your eggs in one basket, especially when that basket might have some holes in it.
Exactly. It's a direct response to China's growing presence in space. And they're not just talking the talk. They're actively working with U.S. agencies like the Space Development Agency, playing a key role in national security efforts.
So they're right there in the thick of it, this technological and geopolitical battle for space. It's like a real-life space opera.
It really is. It just goes to show how important private companies are becoming in the space industry these days. They're not just supporting players anymore, they're shaping the future of space exploration and influencing the balance of power up there.
It's a new era of space exploration, and private companies like Rocket Lab are leading the charge. Pretty exciting stuff.
Totally agree. But it's not just about technology and competition. It's about the human spirit of discovery, the drive to push beyond our limits and explore the unknown.
Beautifully said. Before we move on, you mentioned the potential of blockchain technology in space. Are there specific ways Rocket Lab could use this technology, or even the small satellite industry as a whole?
Now, that's a fascinating frontier. While Rocket Lab hasn't publicly announced any blockchain projects, there are some game-changing possibilities. For instance, imagine a secure and transparent system for tracking satellite launches using blockchain. No more shady dealings or questions about who launched what.
Makes sense, especially with so many new players in the game. A reliable tracking system would build trust and ensure everyone's playing fair.
Exactly. And how about using blockchain to secure data transmission between satellites and ground stations? That's crucial for sensitive information, like Earth observation data or national security stuff.
So blockchain could make the whole satellite ecosystem more secure and transparent.
Precisely. As the space industry keeps growing and evolving, we'll see even more creative uses for blockchain. It's just the beginning.
This deep dive has been a wild ride. We've covered everything from Rocket Lab's vision and technology to their role in the geopolitical landscape and the potential of blockchain in space. What's next on our agenda?
Well, we've got a good grasp of Rocket Lab's operations and the big picture. Now let's zoom in on some specifics. Remember those 3D printed Rutherford engines? Those are a perfect example of their innovative thinking and their drive to keep costs down.
I'm all ears. Tell me more about those engines, and what about the Neutron rocket? What makes it so special, and how does it fit into their long-term plans?
Those are great questions, and we'll tackle them in our next segment. Stick around.
And we're back for the final leg of our Rocket Lab deep dive. Time to get into those technical, nitty-gritty details we teased before.
Let's fire up those 3D printers and get into the nuts and bolts of Rocket Lab's innovation.
Okay, those Rutherford engines. You said they're 3D printed. What's that all about? And why is it such a game changer?
Well, it's a whole new level of efficiency and cost effectiveness when it comes to manufacturing. Think about it. Rocket engines. They're super complex, expensive to build, lots of intricate parts, specialized labor, the whole shebang.
Right, definitely not something you can just whip up in your garage.
Exactly. But with 3D printing, Rocket Lab can basically print these engines layer by layer using these high-tech materials.
So it's like a super advanced 3D printer, but instead of plastic toys, it's spitting out rocket engines. That's wild, but what does that actually mean in practice? What are the advantages?
Well, for starters, it cuts down production time massively. Instead of weeks or even months, they can churn these engines out in a matter of days. Essential when you're aiming for those rapid-fire launches.
So they can keep up with the demand. But is it actually cheaper, 3D printing versus the traditional way?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. No need for expensive tooling, less waste. It all adds up to big savings. And those savings, they get passed on to the customers, making space more affordable.
Faster production, lower costs, more access to space for everyone. Win-win-win. Okay, let's talk about their other big innovation, the Neutron rocket.
Hmm.
What sets this one apart, and how does it fit into their grand scheme?
Neutron is built for the big leagues, the medium lift market. Can haul payloads up to 8 metric tons to low Earth orbit, way more than the Electron can handle.
So it fills a gap, lets them go after bigger clients, more ambitious missions. But you mentioned reusability being a key part of the Neutron. Tell me more about that.
Absolutely. They're aiming to recover and reuse that first stage, which is the priciest part of the whole rocket. That would slash launch costs and give them a serious edge over the competition.
Reusability, always a game changer.
Yeah.
But how are they planning to pull that off? Is it like what SpaceX does with their Falcon 9?
Actually, they're trying something different. Instead of landing with engines, they're going to snatch that first stage right out of the air using a helicopter with a special capture system.
Wait, they're going to catch a rocket with a helicopter?
Uh-huh.
That sounds straight out of a James Bond movie.
It's ambitious, no doubt. But Rocket Lab's not afraid to push the limits. And they think this method has some advantages, like using less fuel and being able to land in more places.
It's a bold move, that's for sure. If they can pull it off, it could change the whole reusability game. I'm definitely going to be watching that closely.
Me too. And don't forget, Neutron is designed to be a real chameleon. Can handle all sorts of payloads, even launch multiple satellites at once.
So it's powerful, reusable, and adaptable. Sounds like they're building the ultimate space workhorse.
Exactly. That versatility is how they plan to conquer that commercial launch market. They want to be the go-to for everything, scientific missions, Earth observation, you name it. Even space tourism down the line.
Space tourism, wow. Now that's a future I want to see. It sounds like Rocket Lab is aiming high, and they've got the technology and the drive to back it up. But as we wrap up, let's zoom out for a moment. What's the bigger picture here? What does Rocket Lab's success mean for the future of space exploration as a whole?
Great question. I think Rocket Lab shows us that private companies are the ones pushing the boundaries these days. Their focus on accessibility, affordability, and speed, it's creating opportunities for everyone, from small startups to big agencies, to be a part of the space revolution.
So they're democratizing space, making it a more level playing field. That's pretty inspiring.
It is. And their success is drawing in more investment, more competition, which just speeds up the pace of innovation and discovery. It's a golden age for space exploration, and companies like Rocket Lab are at the forefront.
And as we discussed, they're also playing a crucial role in the geopolitical landscape, especially when it comes to the US and China. They're helping to keep the balance of power from tipping too far in one direction.
Absolutely. They're contributing to national security, diversifying launch capabilities. It's all part of the equation. And as the space industry keeps growing, we're going to see this interplay between commercial interests, national security, and international competition become even more complex and fascinating.
It's a brave new world out there, folks. Well, we've reached the end of our Rocket Lab deep dive. It's been a wild ride filled with bold ambitions, groundbreaking technology, and a glimpse into a future where space is more accessible than ever before.
I've loved exploring this with you. As we sign off, I want to leave our listeners with one last thought. Could Rocket Lab's dedication to accessibility and innovation lead to a future where space isn't just for governments and giant corporations, but a truly open frontier for all of humanity? Something to ponder as we watch them continue to reach for the stars.
A fantastic question. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Rocket Lab. Until next time, keep looking up.